Okay.
The main thing I was going to do today was just mostly focus on. Here, let's go back over this way. Nope, 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 nope.
There you go, right
That,
there.
there we go, right there. Yeah. So the main thing I was going to focus on today was just the facial tones, the skin tones,
Right.
because I think that's where everybody's kind of like, what are you doing? I mean, I think everybody knows how to paint Santa's clothes red and all that good stuff.
Right.
So, and that's all I'm using for red. That's all I'm going to use um, for the red. This is cadmium red, medium hue.
Right.
So I'm going to put a little bit in here, mix it up. I always put a small amount of water. See how you can see those little specks in there?
Right.
Can you? Yeah. So I always, when I first mix it up, I do just a little bit of water so that I can see all the specks and make sure they're out. You know, because I had one gentleman in my first class sit down. He's like, "What do I do now?" And I said, "I don't know. What's the problem?" He said, "I just painted a streak across my face." I was like, "Well, for one, don't do that. Don't do that." But
I always make mine too red. I try and try and try, and it just to me it just seems to be too red. Um,
well, the thing is, but a lot of times when people water it down like this,
mm-hmm,
they're like, "Oh, I don't like it that it's pink."
mm-hmm,
And that's how it comes across with the white background of my palette. But
right,
that's not how it's going to paint on this wood.
right,
So, sometimes we got to keep in mind, the way it paints on the wood and the way it looks in the palette
right.
can be completely different.
Well, and having that spare piece of wood off to the side, I found really helps when I'm trying to get.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me check something because I got to text Janie um, the info. Shoot.
What do you need?
The number, it
Yeah,
was
hang on.
seven. It was 752. What was it? 752.
752-018-1144.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right, we're back. She said she was in the house and she didn't have the ID info. Okay, I need a smaller brush. And let me show you this. When I'm painting faces, now for one, it's because of the size I carve,
Right.
but these are the brushes I will use. Um, the red handle one, I mostly only use that for the eyes.
Right.
Um, waiting room. Wait a minute. What is this? Do it on here. Oh shoot. Dang on it. I keep forgetting. I got a new laptop. So that's working. Oh, that's cool. I like that. But I got a new laptop, and my new laptop is not a touchscreen. And my
Oh,
old laptop was a touchscreen, so I keep trying to
right.
touch the screen and have something happen.
Right.
So this brush is mostly just for painting the eyes. That's a fine detail brush. It's actually a number 0 Princeton Velvet Touch round. And then the rest of these are what I'm going to paint with. And mostly I'm going to use this one, maybe this one, maybe this one. So I use very fine tip brushes for all this stuff.
How do you get your tips back to being in good shape like that when you're...
I wet it and stick it in my mouth.
Oh, that's right. That's what, yeah.
I can't believe you asked that.
I can't either.
I thought I was infamous for that.
Yeah, brain fart.
But yeah, I just stick it in my mouth and shape it. Voila. It's back to Purdy. Yeah, and the side piece of wood is the perfect thing to do, especially when you're here. Let me see if I'm... let's see here. Do I need to angle this more? I'm not getting that shadow. Yeah.
Good right there.
Okay. But yeah, now I've kind of changed my technique. So a lot of times when I'm painting, I paint this a little bit heavier. But in the beginning, this is how you want to do it. You want this extremely watered down, so that it's better to not have enough red than to have too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll show you that in a minute, because I can always go back over this and add some more red to it. And right. I do. I add layer after layer. So, and this is just simply just, putting it on. But yeah, if you get a lot of the hobby stores have the mini detail brushes for the guys that do the gaming, and they paint their little soldiers and crap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good set of, you can get a good set of brushes that way. And I recently posted, well, not recently, I guess it's been a while now, but I had posted a link to these brushes because I've had these since, I think it was 2018, 2019, and they're still going strong. So they're actually, pretty steadfast brushes. Shouldn't have this bracelet on. It's making a lot of noise. And the thing is, I'm not a firm believer in all the crystal crap and all that stuff. Right. But I have trigger finger in both my hands, and I've had trigger finger in my right hand forever. I can't think of when I didn't have it, but right now I have it in my left hand, and it's kind of annoying because that's the hand I hold the piece of wood with. Shoot, I meant to bring up the new knives I have just to hold them in front of this piece of wood. So, because I did that post yesterday telling people, I'm working with longer knives now. And everything on this was carved with either the 1.5 inch or the 1 3/4 inch knife. And I was talking with my buddy Alton Spence last night. And I was like, I don't think people understand. And he goes, Richard, for you, that's like a massive knife. And I was like, yeah, exactly. So you can see the color right there.
Right.
And I've told a lot of people, honestly, you could just do that. And that would be pretty good. But we're going to do more. So the thing is, make sure when you first water it down, you really, really, really water it down where, it looks too watered down, because we're going to add layers. And I always paint inside the mouth and just a little bit on the lip, just so it stands out. The main two colors I use in painting a face, I mean, look at that.
Yeah, that's pretty good right there.
How cool is that?
Yep.
Yeah, I told people, I said, if you're not, heavy into painting, that was so much easier than doing all these stupid mixtures that people do. A lot of people do all these crazy mixtures of this flesh tone and this red, and I just don't have time for that. I'm too
Right.
lazy to go through that, and I used to tell people the thing is, what if you're carving chips? What if it falls in chips? Then you've got to duplicate that color. But
Mm.
honestly, um, all the layers I do, I'm not going to be able to duplicate that color either. And the other thing is, to date, I have not had a single carving fall and chip. So yeah, so see, there you go. I've had them. I've had them fall,
Right.
and I'm going to do one more just to because we might do a little contrast and compare. The thing is, too, probably in this little demo, if you've got time, I will show you how I layer the colors for the beard.
Yeah.
Because I use extremely watered down burnt umber. I use extremely watered down black. Now, normally the burnt umber is not watered down as much as the black. Um, Janie left us. How rude.
Hmm.
How rude. Oh, there she is again. Daggone it. I did it again where I'm trying to touch the damn screen.
Put a sticky note on it.
I know. It's like, well, that's still not working, but okay. But yeah, so I use the two colors, the watered down burnt umber, watered down black, and then I do the dry brush on top of that. Look at that. I mean, I tell people, I mean, honestly, you know,
Yeah.
just that alone is a good flesh tone. And the part about that with the watered down red is part of it's the color of the wood showing
Right.
through and adding additional color. So that's part of it. It's that's why when it's painted on wood, it looks better than when it's sitting in the palette.
Right. Well,
You
because
know,
from here, you're the color in the palette. You say extremely watered down,
yeah,
and me looking at the color in the palette, it it looks pretty red. You know what I mean?
yeah. But the thing is,
It
on camera, it looks
right,
redder than it does in for
right,
me. So here, let's
right,
see if I don't know if I hold this up here. But part of that is, oh yeah, I'm going to cast a shadow, dingy. But part of that is because you've got the color of your palette that is
right,
showing through this watered down color.
right,
So it kind of makes it look like a darker color than it is,
right.
you know.
Yeah, it
And
can fool you.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes oh, come on, what are you doing? I didn't do that. There you go. I didn't move it that much. There we go. But yeah, I mean, that alone, for the people that don't like to paint, that alone is a good flesh tone,
Yep,
you know.
yep.
So, and um, I'm gonna paint them all. That's normally what I do
Beats
when
what
I've got
I'm.
a. What was that, Miss?
I said it beats the color I'm using.
Yeah,
Is it just red? I'm sorry I missed it. I could not get in the house. I don't know if it was too. I don't know what happened.
I told Bud. I said, well, I let Janie in, but she left. Yeah, this is just
No,
cadmium red.
it kept telling me I had no sound.
Hmm, interesting. But yeah, it's just the cadmium red, medium hue, watered down, extremely watered down. And every class I've taught when I do a paint demo, it's so funny because I always have, somebody that's, well, I've been doing this for years. And they're always like, well, I water mine down. You can't water it down but so much. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and do the demo and let's see. And every time they're like, oh, I guess I don't really water mine down. But once again, I like layering colors. So to me, this is part of the fun. And at
Plus that
times what was that, sir?
the Howard Speed and Wax is a game changer. It really is for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say, keep in mind that there are two things that are going to impact this before I'm done painting. First, just going to be the layering of color, because I will bring in some extremely watered down cadmium red deep hue to kind of highlight the cheeks, highlight the nose. But then on top of it, I use the golden elixir Howard Feed and Wax.
Yep.
And I tell everybody, if and once again, I'm a little lazy. So Tony Harris kept going, Richard, the way you paint, you really need to try Howard Feed and Wax. Like, yeah, okay. I'll pick some up next time I'm at the store. And then I'd forget, So finally he sent me a little container of it, and he made me a video. This is how I apply it. This is how this is how I, smooth it down. He said, it's that simple. You really should try this. So when he sent me the tube, he said, the next one you carve and paint, apply this instead. So, it's like, well, it's all here. I guess I can do it now.
Yep.
And if my bracelet scraping the table gets annoying, let me know and I'll take it off.
I really don't even hear it. But...
Oh, good. So there you go. There's all the faces. There's all the faces painted. And once again, for what some people do, this is the color they get. I mean, Janie, the one you showed me yesterday, this isn't that far from that color. It's not as deep. It's not as opaque, but it's pretty close to the color you had on that one. It looks what?
Did my bottle looks. See, you see that color?
Yeah.
That's the one that was mixed up. And then I'm supposed to add a little bit of this to it, which is supposed to be the blush that's mixed up, which is crimson, and it doesn't say what else.
Well, see, here's the other thing,
I'd much rather
guys.
do your steps.
Yeah, see, here's the other thing. When you're mixing that all the time, then your color is going to be based on, how good was I paying attention when I was mixing my colors this time? But it's the same with me as well, though. It's, how did I water it down the same amount?
Right.
And I kind of like that I don't water it down the same amount every time. I don't mind having a variation of my colors. But this also helps let the actual natural color of the wood show through. And I like that. So all we've done so far is use, see if I can get this up here. No, it's not going to focus. Cadmium red, medium hue. And it's really kind of a reddish. One of the things I like about Liquitex is some of their bottles on the outside, it actually looks like the color. Because there are some paints that on the outside,
you're right.
It's like, well, that color can't be right. Because I wouldn't paint that. And once again, we're not using much. Just that little bit. And like before, we're just going to add just a little bit of water. Make sure all the little speckles are used up. Now, when I do the cadmium red deep hue, I put some over in a little well by itself. So I can apply just a very faint amount of black. Maybe a little bit more. Too much. There you go. I knew I was going to do that. Heck on it. But that's okay. And 9 times out of 10 anymore, I do this every time, where when I'm taking it straight from the tube, I put too much.
Yeah.
Because, depending on, I mean, the tip of my brushes is black. So sometimes it's hard for me to tell how much black I have on it. But that's okay. We're going to fix that.
I use a toothpick sometimes.
Yeah, but see, you know how prepared I am when I do this stuff, bud. Yeah. I would never remember to get a toothpick. And then I'd have to get up and I'd have to walk out and get a toothpick, and just the drama of it all. It's just too much. It's just too much. I'm going to move him out of the way and clean my brush to make sure. All right, let's water this down. Now, just need a little bit. When I used to do the bags under the eyes, I had seen something that Lynn Doty did. So I was doing a mixture of dark blue, black, and white. And then one time I was like, do I really need to do that? Can I just do red with a little bit of black? I'm mixing just a little bit more red in here, because I don't want to lose the reddish, but I want it to be a darker red. And I want, because, the bags under your eyes always look, like you're dying. And a lot of people don't like doing this. I will tell you, this is the most fun I have, is when I'm playing around mixing colors. Uh-oh. Did not mean to do that. There you go. I think I'm going to take that. Yeah, that's maybe not dark enough, but let's play around with it and see. So now I've got 3 colors I can play with. I've got cadmium red deep hue with some watered down black. I've got cadmium red deep hue, just watered down. So let's start doing some layering. Very first thing I do is the nose. So let's apply this on the nose and see how this is going to look. And I can tell you right off the bat, it's way too watered down. Yep. But the thing is, keep in mind, if it's too watered down, you can always add some color. To lighten it, you've got to add a ton of water to balance it out. So it's easier to slowly add a little bit more color, a little bit on the brush at a time, than it is to continually keep adding water. Because at one point, you're going to go above the well. And I would rather not have heavy color than have heavy color, So I'd rather have it be a little bit more faint than a little too heavy. That's still the one thing I always remind folks is that when you're painting watered down colors, when you first apply it onto the carving, some of that darkness in the color is actually the wetness of the wood.
Right.
So remember that is going to lighten up some, just because it's going to dry. And the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it, and the more you'll realize, you know. So that's taking it a little bit darker. Did that. But, and sometimes I'll do this. Let's take a little bit of this and add this on and see if maybe it does just need some darkness to it. I used to always debate how far up the nose do I bleed this extra red. And then I was watching a movie, and this guy had kind of a reddish nose because they were out in the cold. And I was like, you know, the reddish of the nose stops right at the big round part of your nose. It doesn't go all the way up the bridge of your nose. It stops, you know. And a lot of people, you can actually see where it stops. There's like this, you know, magical line. So I started doing that. I started realizing, you know, I can have that little bit of a line, and it's okay. So now I just kind of go right to the top of the nose there. And once again, I think I've said this before, but I've tried a couple times to paint just the cadmium red deep hue, and for me, it doesn't work. I need to start with that base of cadmium red medium hue first, and then add to it. So that's starting to show through.
Yep.
Where you can see the redness of the cheeks. Oh, there you go. If I have my laptop actually leaning up a little. But now you can see the contrast between the, you know, the forehead and, you know, a lot of times you can use the cadmium red deep hue to do the lips, just to darken those in a little. I can come in here and add a little bit more of just the watered down red, just the medium hue. And don't feel like you can't tell me. So if I go off screen, let me know. I actually don't think I have the arm of my holding my phone in the right position today, but that's okay.
You know, I don't have a problem telling you.
That's true. Yeah. Today, Bud, you should know Janie's been playing with the idea of illustrating mashed potatoes.
Hmm.
And I think I've talked her off that ledge.
Yeah.
Because you know, and I didn't text it to her. I almost did, but I almost texted you, Janie, and said, you know, a pile of mashed potatoes and a pile of poo, you know, except for the color, it's pretty much the same thing.
Right. But I was actually trying to make a series of potatoes. And I didn't have a mashed potato in there. So I wanted to add one. And Richard was right. I got out of that thinking on the mashed.
Because, you know, originally I thought she was talking about carving it, and I thought, really? Because that's not really going to be a fascinating carve. But then again, it might. You never know.
But this one done.
If you carved in the potato masher, now that would be funny. So what I did is I thought some of these painted a little light, and so I wanted to show you. This is 2 layers. This is 1 layer. Keep in mind this bottom one, that's a dry layer. These are wet. So that kind of shows you that you will see it lighten up when it dries. But also too, when you paint it wet, that kind of gives you a preview of what it's going to look like when you add the Howards. It'll have a little bit more golden tone, but that's pretty much what you're going to get from it is you're going to get, it's going to have that deeper look. So
Yeah,
really
kind
this
of tones
face,
it down.
yeah. And the biggest thing is for me, I'm trying to get more subtle with my colors. So I don't want my, the nose and the cheeks to look like, a clown. I just want it to look like Santa's cold. Because sometimes we overdo the nose and it looks, you could easily just, carve a ball. Okay. I think you guys kind of get the idea. Do you want me to do one more or do you want me to show you the beard? Because I can take one of these and layer the colors one more time. Anybody have a preference?
I'm okay. Wait.
What was that?
I don't know what I didn't get it. What you said actually.
What was that, Janie? Oh, now she won't talk to us. How rude.
Sorry, I had it muted and didn't realize it. We were just talking away.
I know. I was getting ready to tell you, I see your mouth moving, but I'm not hearing a thing.
I think I have mashed potato brain. I was saying I can go either way, either paint another face or the beard. It doesn't matter to me. Sorry, bud.
Oh, you're good. That's fine.
I'm practicing to be a mime also.
Just say, Bud, didn't it seem so peaceful before?
Yeah, it was a little bit more quiet.
Oh, wow. I feel so loved.
Welcome to the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one more but I'm going to add some of this darker. The other thing you can do, which I'm getting ready to show you. What was that, Miss?
I was just going to tell Bud the reason I keep going back and forth from mute to unmute is my dog is trained with buttons and you'll hear I love you a million times or cuddles or need to go potty or feed me. So I try to keep that noise out.
I got to tell you.
Yeah, I mute because I'm in Florida and the allergies are really starting to kick in down here. So I'm doing a lot of hack.
Oh, jeez. When do you guys head home?
We're going to head home mid-March.
Okay.
Usually at the end, but we have to get out. People that own the house are coming down. So they kind of got seniority.
Yeah. How's your wife doing, by the way?
Good.
Good.
Went to the doctor the other day and got a clean bill, so everything's good.
God is good.
Yep.
That's awesome. It's the magic of the pirate.
Great. Got that on her desk.
That's funny. Okay. So, I just wanted to do this real quick so you can see with this one how I've added the cadmium red deep hue, but not as heavy on here. So it's a little bit more subtle. Let's add a little bit more. Let's add just a little bit more. So one thing you can do when painting the bags of the eyes, oh, that's way too dark. Let's water that down more. Like really water it down. You can actually water down the color so much that it doesn't even show. Which, if I did this right, I will show you an example of that. So I'm going to do it on this one because you're still seeing a mild hint of it, but hardly at all. So keep that in mind.
Really
you can
curious.
actually, yes, you are.
If you if your tongue is rainbow colored.
No, it's not, because I always rinse out the color before I stick it in my mouth.
Okay.
Although I told them at the Sevierville show, there have been times where I'm just rushing and I go straight from here to my mouth.
Yeah, I have forgotten sometimes and picked up my paintbrush water where I've cleaned my brushes off instead of my coffee. And it only takes one drink.
Yeah.
The worst I ever did was we were coloring eggs. And I can't remember what I was drinking, but I was drinking it out of a coffee mug. And I picked up the wrong mug. And had just a mild sip of colored vinegar.
I was going to say, is that when you put vinegar in it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow. Didn't take a big sip to figure out that that was the wrong thing to do. Yeah. And the boys just loved it. They're like, that's funny. Like, is it though? Is it really?
Yeah.
See, and even that's almost too faint. So, but I mean, I don't even know if for you guys you can see a difference.
No, I can't.
I actually cannot see a difference at all. So once again,
No, I can't.
you can water down too much where you're not really having impact. But like I say, it's better to go slow, mix it up, and then try again instead of just hitting it hard. And I can, even at this point, I can take just a little bit of cadmium red, add a little bit more color to it. Let's try that and see how that is.
Is that deep hue or medium?
That's the deep hue. Exactly. Anymore, it takes me longer to paint a carving than it does to carve the carving. Because it's playtime. It really is. It's just, me playing with colors. That's a little bit darker. Now you will notice, and I was trying to get enough color in here that you could see it. Hopefully you can. But you will notice that when you paint this watered down, there are times where you'll get the color to bleed. So if you look at the top guy's eyes, how they're still the natural color, see how his eye's darker in here? It's because as I was applying that black, it bled in. And some of it just, I painted it so wet, it just flowed in. But because of the way I paint the eyes, that doesn't even matter. I don't use Liquitex Basic White because it's Liquitex is more of a wet paint. So I use the golden acrylic, Blanc de Titane, or titanium white. Yeah, I'm bilingual. Not at all.
I'm having flashbacks from our meetings we've done. I think I'm going to go drink a beer now.
I would say I might not be educational, but I am fairly entertaining. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the eye. And I always do this once. I'm not going to mess with these two. I'm mostly going to focus on these two. Let's do this real quick. Yeah, there you go. That's what I wanted. There are sometimes I'll splash it on and you can see in the beard a little, or the mustache, I mean, how it's kind of bleeding in. That's not really that big of a deal. I guess I could change the camera view. I'm not gonna. But if you look at my chin hair, you can actually see some flesh poking through. You know, not everybody's, whiskers are so thick that you can't see some skin tone in there. This is one of my favorite brushes because it's a good thickness. It's like a velvet finish, so it's really nice to the touch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here with solid white. I'm not watering this down at all. Ooh, look at him paint white on the wood. Ooh, how does he do it? Okay. So now you can see how it didn't matter that it bled in. So next, we're going to let this white little bit just sit and dry. I mean, right now it's thick enough, but if I let it sit just a little bit longer, it'll thicken up even more. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the beard. I'm going to get some cadmium. Cadmium. Shut up. I'm going to get some burnt umber. And this is Liquitex, but this is the heavy body acrylic, which honestly, not necessarily a fan of. It's not bad, but it's a little heavy. So get a little bit more water, squirt it. That's fairly watered down. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll pull the color up along the side of the well, and that kind of gives you a better idea of how watered down it is. So you can see here when it's coming out of the brush, kind of what your color is going to be. I want that just ever so much lighter. And then I'm going to take a little bit of black because I think I watered that down. You know what? We're just going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. How dark is that? Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Because when you're doing the beard and you're layering the black and the brown, there's no really right or wrong. Just mix up two colors, water one down, have the other one not watered down as much, and go for it. So we're going to put the black on first. Let's go back in the light. Now here's where, when I apply it on, do you see the difference in the wood?
Mm-hmm.
Not really, huh?
I see a little bit on that mustache.
Yeah, I see it, but it's almost like it's just wet, that you're really not seeing color as much as you are a wet piece of wood, if that makes sense. So I want to go just a tad darker because I want the color to show through. Because remember, this paint's going to dry, and once it dries, some of that color or tone is going to go away. So I want it just a little bit darker than that to make sure that I'm actually not just seeing wet wood. And here, let's do this. Oh, the fun we have on Mulberry Street. So I'm just pulling some water from my glass and just wetting this down. See how the two look pretty similar?
Mm-hmm.
So that's showing me that actually the darkness of that wood, it could be just as much just as being wet as it being painted. Now, because I got that wet so that I get an even color all over the place, now I need to wet down the whole thing. If not, in this little area, it's going to take the paint different. So whatever you do to your carving when you're painting, you got to do it to the whole thing, or you're going to get a variation. Because that water being on the wood is going to accept the color different than the dry wood. So I'm just going to wet this down. And that's, in the beginning when you're painting watered down colors, you can actually do this where you just do a mild layer of water. If you think maybe my colors aren't wet enough, you can add just a mild layer of water to the carving just to make sure that it's, it's light enough. But you can see there, that's just from water. So that's the impact of moisture on top of a piece of basswood.
See, I was told to dip it in water, dip your whole piece in water first, then like dab it with a paper towel and then paint it.
No.
You just do yours straight dry.
Yep.
Boy, I gotta quit listening to so many people.
Well, the thing is, some people do that and they like that technique. I don't. Because I've already added a good amount of water to my paint. And I don't think it makes it accepted any better. There are some people, now, here's the deal. There are some people believe that if you, like with the beard, if you paint the beard with just straight water first, and then I paint with color, some people believe that it won't bleed as much.
I think it bleeds more when it's wet because I've tried it dry and dipping it, like they say. And I find that my colors actually bleed more on the wet wood than dry.
I can see that. I just, and I think I'm going to have to darken this up again, maybe, or I can just do a second coat. Remember, you can always do a second coat, but I'm seeing the color in there. It's not really dominant, but I'm seeing it. And, the thing is, people always ask me, what's your antiquing technique? It's like, it's because I paint wet and I don't mind if it bleeds a little. For me, I don't know. I should care, but I really don't. On my watercolor illustrations, if the paint bled, it would drive me batty. But on my wood, I don't know. I don't care. Because somebody asked me, why doesn't that bother you? And I said, I don't know. It just doesn't. It just absolutely doesn't. But that's part of the fun of the difference from painting wood and painting on watercolor paper. So that's the watered down black. And it's extremely watered down. And once again, the wood was wet already. So, and this is, as you see on the palette, it's not a heavy color. So now we're going with the burnt umber water down.
So if you let that beard dry a little bit, would you come back and put more of the watered down black on there, or just go with what you have?
If I was only going to do the black and the dry brush, then I would come back and put more on. But I wouldn't let it dry. Actually, Bud, I mean, that's one way you could do it, where you could actually kind of get a better feel for how it's taking the paint. Mm-hmm. For me, I'd add more black to the watered down paint and hit it again.
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Now, the problem can be the more you add color to your well, especially black, if there are little specks in there, I can't see them.
All right.
So sometimes what you do is you push the brush up above the water to see if any are popping up. And you can see that's a little bit darker. Well, let's add some on to see how it. There you go.
Yeah.
You're starting to see it darken up some. And you might notice what I'm doing in the beginning is I'm just kind of dabbing it onto the carving and kind of letting the water run a little. I don't normally do this, but when I've put water on first, I'll do that because when you put paint on a watered down area, it's gonna kind of flow with that wetness. So there you go. You can see how that darkened that up.
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute. Somebody's trying to come in. Mike. Okay, so we're going to leave it with that because I think this is going to be a good contrast. Hey, Mike. So now the burnt umber isn't watered down as much as the black. But once again, like we talked, remember, now the beard is wet. So I'm going to kind of dab it on here and kind of let the color flow just a little. That might be watered down more than I need. That's okay. We're going to go with it. The reason I do this is because when you paint dry brush on top of just the plain wood with no paint on it, it still highlights the wood, but the highlight doesn't stand out as much because the contrast between the color of basswood and white is not that extreme. So I started doing this just so the dry brush would stand out a little bit better. Shoot. That's okay. I can use a different brush. I actually, I'm not going to worry about getting it right now, but I actually have a brush that I use strictly for dry brush. Actually, I'm going to grab it. And the thing is, when you're painting dry brush, you can beat up your brushes pretty bad. So a lot of times I just use the same brush. So then I'm only tearing up one set of bristles. That one, and that one. Which are the only two I need. But just like everything else, the size brush that I'm going to use is going to be dependent on the area that I'm painting. So these are the two. You can see how beat up they look because they're strictly used for dry brush. That's all I use them for. So I think I'm going to do the thinner. But now this white has been sitting here for a while and it should have dried out some. And normally I would paint the pupil on. And I don't know if you guys have seen me paint a pupil before, but what I do is I'll paint either the brown or the blue in, and then I'll take my brush and remove the color. Have you guys seen me do that? Right.
I have, but I want to see it again.
Whatever.
Do you see how he treats me, Bud? And I call him a friend.
Yeah.
You've not once heard me say anything mean about him.
Yeah. Silence is golden.
Yeah.
I know. And you know, Bud, honestly, I'm not sure what her point is. Of course you want me to be a friend of yours. I mean, that's just given. I want to have me as a friend.
Is that kind of like I love me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell my son all the time, I think I'm hilarious. I don't get why you don't get it. And my younger boy is kind of more the funny guy. My older son's pretty serious about life, and doesn't really like petting up a lot. But my younger boy, I will he'll like get a drink out of the fridge or make a sandwich or get a snack out. And if he puts it down on the counter, then I will move it. I mean, I gotta admit somebody. I mean, I will move the drink or the food. And I've done it so much now he's like, why? Why are you doing that? I said, because for me, that's funny. He's like, well, not for me. I'm like, well, I don't think I'm doing it for you. So now what I do is I take a just barely wet brush, and you don't want it overly wet. And now I'm going to come in here. I'm going to basically pull the color. Ooh, it's a big blob of blue. I didn't realize it made that big of a dot. This is probably going to bleed a little. Wow. Not cool, man. Not cool. But what I do is I go in and I push that color away. I'm always pushing up into the eyelid. All right, now I want an extremely dry brush because this is fairly wet. I don't do this a whole lot on video because I carve such small little eyes that sometimes you really can't see what the heck I'm doing. So people are like, wow, this is entertaining. What is he doing? Come on. Yank that color off there. So can you see that? No, it's not focusing. What you should see is the inside is a light blue and there's an outline of dark blue on the pupil. If it ever gets to the point where I feel like it's not giving me the look I want, then I'll take a little bit of white, and white on a white palette does not really show that well. So you'll just have to believe me. And now I'm going to take my extremely thin tip brush. I'm just going to dip this in here. And I can blend that white into the eye where it lightens it up even more. But I actually pull a lot of that blue away before I do that. One of these times, I think I need to do a demo on this where I actually carve a bigger eye.
Yes.
Because I don't think you can really tell what that's doing.
Are you starting in the center and pushing out?
When I'm removing the color, you know what? I don't think that's going to work. At first, I make the dot. Oh, let's do this. So what I'm doing is you've got your eye. Then you got the pupil. It's basically like taking a pencil and drawing in the pupil. And then what you're doing is you're coming in here and you're just basically pushing in the middle of that eye and you're pulling the color away. That makes sense?
Yes.
So you're actually taking that brush, and if you do it correctly, you should have that dark line on the outside. I did it small again, didn't I?
Yes, but I got the gist of it that time.
I'm like, wow, that's almost the actual size.
You're just used to doing that size.
I am. Yeah, I really am. But yeah, it's basically you're just pulling that color off with the tip of your brush. And remember, you're not doing it really wet because if you do it wet, it'll bleed. So you don't want that brush wet. Okay. But now that I've done all that, and that's what I would do before I paint the dry brush onto the beard. Now that I've done all that, this beard should be fairly dry. And you're really not seeing the brown per se as much, but it's a darker color on the background. And that's what you want. When you're doing dry brush, for me, I want to see a darker color in the back. Now, because I was just playing around with my palette and it's a little wet here, I'm going to pull the color this way. Completely dry brush. See how it looks a little pasty? Oh, I'm off camera. It looks a little pasty. So I'm just going to dab it in here, and then I'm going to come up in here and I'm going to really thin this down as much as I can because I don't want this heavy. And I've always told people when you're cleaning your brush like this, you almost feel it get a little pasty, a little sticky. And when it does that, you know you're close to where you want it to be or where I want it to be. And I'm always turning my brush a little because I'm trying to make you know, bring back the point of the brush. I'm also trying to pull any loose hairs, that may be sticking out. And now I'm just going to lightly brush across here. And remember, you're hitting the highlights of the whatever you're dry brushing. So you don't go down with it. You kind of go across. And that should guarantee you that you're hitting more of the highlights, the mounds, than you are the shallow end of the carving, the valleys. And no, I'm not going to sing it, but a song did come to mind. Because I'm old. So there's the song Down in the Valley Below. Hang your head over, hear the wind blow. That's another area where my family has to have a certain amount of patience because I can say about anything and a thought will come to mind, usually from a movie because that song was done in a Western back in the day. And my babysitter, when I was a young little child, she loved that song. So whenever that movie came on, we had to watch it while she was babysitting me. She loved that song. It was also sung on Andy Griffith. When Aunt B went out of town, and can't think of the lady's name, but she was helping Andy and Opie survive. Oh, Peg. Her name was Peg. Dang.
Did your babysitter let you out of the cage often or just for lunch?
Actually, I think, she was probably a terrible babysitter and she just put on a musical and had me sit in front of the TV. Listen to the pretty songs, Ricky. But to this day, I love musicals. And you keep going until you figure, I like it. It's good. But see how that paint in the background really brings out that dry brush?
Yeah, that darker, that offsets it really nice.
Yeah, and here, I'm going to do this real quick, see if no, that doesn't help. But yeah, it just makes it stand out just a tad bit better. So use the cadmium red medium hue for the first coating on the face. Extremely watered down. Usually do a layer or two, depending on how watered down I have it. Once I've done that, then I go to the cadmium red deep hue and I highlight the cheeks, I highlight the nose. Sometimes I do the forehead, but not that much. After I've done that, Then I take the cadmium red deep hue with, and it's extremely watered down. And I've always told people whenever I'm talking about colors, just throw in extremely watered down. That's always, part of, but, and see, you can see how when it was separate and when it mixes up the difference in color. So I take the cadmium red deep hue, extremely watered down, mixed with watered down black. And remember, I use this to try to highlight the bags under the eyes. Now, see, that's the third coating. And see how it's standing out now? Part of that's because it's wet. Part of it's because of the color. But the thing is, I would rather have my painting process take longer and add, because this is what, the third, if not fourth layer on that, on underneath the eye. But I would rather do that and have it just be a mild color than do a heavier mixture of the cadmium red, deep hue, and black, paint it on, and have it look like he's got a black eye. It's always better to, do a little bit at a time instead of too much all at once. At least for me.
One thing I notice about your beard is you don't go left to right when you do your dry brushing like I was taught. You just go straight up and down.
Now, I was going side to side, but I depending on the area, I will go up and down. When you're first doing dry brush, it's better to go left to right.
It just looked like
well, and I will, Janie. But the thing is, I always tell people in the beginning, go left to right, because you need to get comfortable with the idea of hitting the mounds and not having your brush go down into the valleys. And you may have noticed when I was going up and down, I was kind of hitting it with the side of my brush, not the tip. So I was letting the side of the brush hit that and not the tip, because if I let the tip hit it, then it'll go down into those valleys, the valleys below. Hang your head over. Hear that wind blow. But yeah, you always want to make sure that however you do it, and either way works. But like when you're doing the mustache, you kind of have to go down. But you always want the brush to be just gliding along the top and not digging in. Because the more you do it like that, see how that brush is bending in? It's getting into those valleys. And then you're not going to have the highlights from the dry brush. You're just going to have painted over the black beard with white. Do you want me to paint another beard? Just so you can see the process again? Do you care?
I'll go for it. I got
Okay.
about 10 minutes, I got probably.
I was close to going Bueller. Yeah, and like the other demo, I will take questions and I will stay on here and answer questions and do as much as you guys want me to do. But don't feel like you're obligated to stay for the whole thing. I don't know if any of you noticed, but Bud needs to take a shower.
Yeah, you might hear my wife. She's
No.
back laughing.
Hey, tell her I said hi.
Hi.
She said hi.
I'm glad to hear you're doing well, health-wise.
I'm doing great.
Keep fighting like a pirate.
Yep.
That's awesome. God is good that way.
Yes. Couldn't have done it without him.
Well, and you have enough burdens in your life, just like my wife, dealing with your husband.
Mm, I better get back to work now.
And don't forget when you're doing the beard to go underneath the mustache, because you don't want everything to look, a color until it leans. And then you go, ooh, it's white underneath that mustache. So the first thing we do is we paint on the watered down black. Now, Bud and Janie, since you guys were here for the first one, you're probably noticing that that's painting darker. Because remember, I showed you guys how if you paint the beard by itself, just with water, it'll darken on its own.
Right.
So for Bob and Mike, I'm going to do that real quick. So I'm just painting the beard over here with just water. And you should be able to see how it's darkening just from the moisture on wood. The reason I show this to people is I always remind folks, when you're painting with watered down paints, in the beginning, what you're seeing is not only the color you've applied, but just the wood changing color because it's wet. So the moisture of the watered down paints impacts this just as much. And because you're painting a watered down color, you're seeing it more. Where if you were painting with a solid opaque color, you wouldn't notice that because you're not really seeing the wood as much. So keep in mind when you do paint with watered down colors, part of the tone in the beginning is the moisture of the watered down colors. But if you use Howard Feed and Wax, this is kind of giving you an indication of what it's going to look like once you've applied the Howard Feed and Wax as well. All right, so now we're going with the watered down burnt umber. And like I said before, you might see me pulling my brush up alongside here. Am I on? When I pull the brush up here and let it come out of the brush, you can kind of see how watered down the color really is, because you can't tell in this well. So when you pull it up alongside, that's really giving you the indication of how watered down it is. And I always like to, when I'm painting a dry brush on a beard, I like to mix both burnt umber and black. And now you can kind of see the contrast between the two. It's not drastic, but you don't want it to be drastic. You don't want to paint it so heavy that you take away, because even basswood has a certain amount of grain, and when you paint watered down, a lot of times you can pull that grain out. Unfortunately, this piece, it's not really showing. But this was a really dense piece of wood, so it was fun to carve. And like I said in the blah 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 blah, like I said in the posting yesterday, everything on this study stick was carved with either the Steve Brown signature 1.5 inch or the Steve Brown signature 1.75 inch. And those of you that know me, that's like a massive chunk of it's a massive chunk of knife for me to use, especially on these small carvings. Okay, now what I did here is the beard. I had already done the black and I did the burnt umber. Up in here, I just did the burnt umber. And the reason I did that, so you can see the contrast between the two, how they would look layered or just the burnt umber by itself. See how much lighter that is? So for one, that shows you how watered down the burnt umber is, but it shows you how the two layered make a new color. And you should be able to see or feel the impact of the burnt umber on top of the black. Now it shouldn't be as much a gray as it's kind of a I'm a lost for words here. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but you should see the burnt umber mixed in with the black. So because I did that and I want everything to match, now I'm going to go in the opposite direction and I'm going to paint the black on top of here. Because you want it to blend in. Now this, you'll see I'm doing very light layers because I don't want to put too much black and overwhelm the burnt umber. But also too, sometimes when you're doing a carving and you're painting it, you can have a little bit of variance between the beard and the hair, because this is kind of like the hair, this is kind of like the beard, so you can have a variance because sometimes people's beards are a different color than their hair on their head. I don't want that, so let's see if I can get this to behave, because it's really not taking the black well. That's not bad. We're going to leave it just like that. That's good enough, because you're also seeing that the color right in here is starting to get heavier with the black because it's kind of bleeding down. So we're going to leave it like that, and that's going to be good enough. And just for grins and giggles, I'm going to real quickly take my brush, and I'm going to take some of the cadmium red deep hue, and I'm going to hit the nose one more time, because I want to show you how one extra layer can change the look. And it's not too red. It just means this guy isn't as cold or out in as much cold as this guy. And I'm going to try to just very gently just do that lower. Because a lot of times when we're doing the cheeks and the nose, and I don't know why, but a lot of times here's what we do, guys. We paint the lower half of the cheek, but usually the lower part of your cheek is not sticking out or protruding as much as your cheekbone itself. So when you do it this way, and I've seen a lot of carvers do it, I've done it myself plenty of times, but the thing is, that's actually wrong. It would actually be this cheekbone up here that is taken on the red, not the lower portion. So I'm just going to kind of blend that out, because it's that upper cheek that would be highlighted with more of the reddish, not the lower part. So you kind of want to do that. And I don't know why, but I've seen a lot of carvers, and like I say, I've done it a ton of times myself, where I highlight that lower part of the cheek and not the actual cheekbone, because the cheekbone is actually sticking out more than the lower part. All right, we got our two colors. And it doesn't take that long. So we can do dry brush again. Full disclosure, I did accidentally dip my brush in the water. And I had already cleaned it off. So I'm just using my t-shirt to dry it as much as I can, because you want that brush dry.
Carol Levy would be very proud of you.
Would he really?
Carol Levy uses their t-shirt all the time.
Yeah, but she uses her pit, from what I've been told.
She uses that, everything. It doesn't matter. If it's a clean part of the t-shirt, she'll use it.
That's what somebody told me one time. They're like, yeah, she'll stick her brush under her armpit. And because I stick my brush in my mouth, I was like, well, that's disgusting. That's really gross. But it's funny that you have a bunch of grown adults at a demonstration watching me paint and all the giggling and laughing every time I stick the brush in my mouth. And I really did think that was a common thing that a lot of painters did, but I'm actually learning that that's really not that common. And as my family would say, it's a tad disgusting.
I don't think I've even accidentally done it.
You haven't lived. That's all I'm telling you. You haven't lived until you've tasted the cadmium red medium hue. And once again, I'm somewhat laying my brush flat. I'm not dabbing it in, and I'm just sweeping across here. And as we talked before, because I'm laying my brush flat, then I can go with the flow of the whiskers because I'm not using the tip of my brush, I'm using the edge of it. So, like right here, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go down with it, but see, I'm letting the whole body of the brush hit it, not just the tip. And see, you can do kind of a heavier dry brush or you can do a light dry brush. And a lot of that for me is based on how dark did I make the whiskers themselves. So if I made the beard itself fairly dark from the black and the burnt umber, then I might do a lighter version of the dry brush because I know it's going to stand out more. A lot of times too, I see people putting dry brush in areas that it makes no sense. Now I will at times I will dry brush the top of the cap. A lot of times I'll dry brush the tassel or the fur of the cap, but I won't fill in. Usually I do it upside down, and I can just gently hit that little area that I kind of just roughly shaped for the eyebrows, and hit it with carve a lot bigger pieces than I do. So the idea of detailing the eyebrows is just not even a fun thought. I mean, I probably could with my number one veiner, but I can also just do that, and that works just as well. Any questions on anything I've done so far?
I don't have any.
Wow.
I really, I really like the way your dry brushing comes out. I really do. I'm looking at one on my shelf that was given to me, and it's just not. It's just not. It just doesn't look like yours, and I know it's not yours, but
is it heavier,
I just like
lighter,
the detailing that you, huh?
Is it heavier,
Yours
lighter?
has a lot more. It. I think it's probably lighter. Maybe it's the color underneath, but it's just not. It's not as detailed. I'll cover up the face so you won't know whose it is, because I'm not bashing the artist at all.
Oh, come on.
But
Show the whole thing.
can you see?
No.
It's like clunky and heavy and
Yep.
light and
Yeah. They're not I can tell you exactly what's happening. They're not thinning out the brush. So the actual brush is holding more of the paint. So when you first make that first swipe, a big chunk of that paint's hitting the beard.
okay.
Yeah. So that means that when they first load the brush, they're not thinning it down as much. And some people like that heavier look. I don't. I like the thin lines.
Yeah, I like the way yours came out. I'm going to try and copy that.
Well, and the thing is, if you use Howard Feed and Wax,
I do.
if you do the heavier paint, then when you apply the Howard Feed and Wax, that heavier paint might be dry on the edge or the top layer, but underneath it might still have some moisture in it. So, and then if you use, like I do, I use a horsehair brush from a shoe polishing kit. You can actually have chunks of that paint pull off.
Okay, and I did have that happen to me. The first time I used the Howard Feed and Wax, it actually took the dry brushing completely off. So I don't know if I just didn't let it dry long enough. So what I did after that was, after I applied the Howards and brushed it with the shoe brush, then I dry brushed over top of that.
Yeah, and the thing is, they say the rule of thumb is when you're painting with acrylic paint to hold the carving under a light, and if you're seeing like a sheen or a shimmer from the paint, that's telling you the paint's not completely dry.
Okay.
It shouldn't have like a shiny coating. It should be a dull color. So once you see the paint's gone dull, you know it's dry. And pretty much the dry brush that I did, it's dry on here.
I didn't let it dry long enough, I'm guessing.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Yeah, you need to let it dry longer. I really can't. Well, I really can't shoot because I have somebody that's going to buy this. So I can't. I was going to say I could almost hit this with Howard Feed and Wax. I need to paint the whole thing, so I'm not going to do that. But you could hit that with Howard Feed and Wax, and you would see that dark background pop out even more. You also might notice that a lot of times if you have a hint of fuzzies, the wet paint you do can kind of soften those down and cover those up. Now, as you just saw, I was taking my thumbnail and rubbing it against the bottom of the nose. Almost every nose I do, and you might be able to see it right here, there's like an edge. There's a hard edge.
I can give you a secret. You see this?
No.
This is a deer antler that I cut off and I grind it to a point or buff it to a point. I use this on cottonwood bark and I use it on my basswood. I go through and I smooth out everything with it. You can actually put a wrinkle in with it, and if you don't like it, you can smooth it right back out and it's no evidence that it's ever there, and that will smooth down everything for you.
Now, I like the idea of the wrinkle, but you know, Janie, I mean, the way
it'll
I carve,
also smooth your eyeballs too. I'm telling you, little tiny eyeballs, big eyeballs.
Yeah, but see,
I'll make you one as you.
Okay.
You can try it.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt my feelings if you throw it away. It's not my antler. But it does work. I can tell you.
How'd you get the deer to let you cut the
lopsided? Bambi's running out there in the field with, the head leaning to the left. Because Janie cut off half the antler.
I have a drawer.
It's going in circles. But the thing is, I don't know why, but at times I'll start the painting process and I'll look at the ice and go, oh, I didn't smooth that down as much as I should. And a lot of times I'll just paint it anyway. I'm like, that's okay. It's a carving. But I would be interested to try that.
I will send
you.
Especially with the wrinkles. I like the idea that you can add like a mild wrinkle in.
And it'll actually take, how people go back in with their knife and kind of smooth out the sharp edges.
Yeah.
The antler will actually round off the edges where you don't have to make an accidental cut when you're trying to smooth it out and you cut too much, or that's a problem I have. This thing will smooth it out so easy.
Cool. Although,
it makes the bags look pretty realistic.
I mean, the thing is, Janie, I'm cartoons to carving, so I don't make mistakes.
Well, I
do. And hopefully everybody's got their boots on. Just getting deep in here.
Even my dog moaned on that one.
That's a cool idea, though. Because, see, for me, I believe any tool is a good tool. If you can find a use for it, and it's a way to, enhance your carving, I don't believe there's any wrong tool that you can use. I'm not a purist. If you want to carve with a knife and a gouge, have at it. If you just want to carve with a knife, that's perfectly fine. But, I think we should use every tool we can to get the look that we want to get.